I feel like I'm always looking for the perfect mouse, and in the budget range, the Keychron M1 might be a good contender, coming in at only $45, but still packing a lot of features. Now, I did pick this mouse up and I've been using it for a few weeks, and of course I had to go with the white version to match my GMMK Pro setup. Now, the Keychron M1 does come in a wired or a wireless configuration, but I don't really see a reason to go with the wired version since the wireless version comes with enough adapters to basically fit all of your needs. Out of the box, you get a USB-C and a USB-A 2.4 GHz wireless adapter and a wired extension to either plug your mouse into for a wired configuration, or you can plug your wireless adapter into it to get better reception while using wireless. Also, I know it's not an indication of the mouse quality, but I do always appreciate when companies provide decent braided cables for the peripherals, and Keychron has done this with the braided USB-C cable they include with the M1. Now, coming in at 79 grams, that's definitely not the lightest mouse on the market, but it's honestly not too bad for the price point and if you're not a pro gamer. The reason there's a little more weight to the mouse, even though it has a honeycomb-like cutout design, is that there's fully customizable RGB in both the body of the mouse and the mouse wheel. You can customize the RGB using the Keychron software where you can change the lighting mode, the brightness, and even the saturation of your RGB. As for actual usage, Keychron says the M1 can pull up to a rate of 1000 Hz, but that's limited to 125 Hz when using Bluetooth. The DPI is also customizable up to 26,000 with a bunch of preset options when you take the mouse out of the box. Now, besides the two main mouse buttons, there's actually 4 other buttons on the M1. There's 2 buttons on the left and the right side of the mouse, depending on if you're using the mouse left or right-handed. These buttons are also customizable in the Keychron software if you want to do anything funky with them. Now, my personal experience with the M1 has been pretty good with 2 complaints. One, they say that it has up to 70 hours of battery life with RGB off, but I would say you can cut that in half or even a third with the RGB on, which really sucks compared to my G Pro Wireless, which feels like I can leave it on for weeks at a time without it dying. Now, I know the G Pro Wireless has a lot less RGB on it, but it's still just a downside to using the M1 over something like the G Pro Wireless. Okay, so here's the thing. I initially had 2 points about the Keychron M1 that I didn't like. The second point, though, is completely invalid. Basically, I was going to complain that the mouse cord has this weird cylinder block on one end of it, and it kept catching on my mouse pad. But then I realized that I could just turn the cable around and plug that annoying part into my PC instead because it's USB-C on both ends. So yeah, point 2 is kind of invalid here. I'll own up to that. And yeah, let's just move on with the video. The mouse is pretty good. Along with your mouse, something that's pretty budget friendly to customize is your keyboard, more specifically your keycaps. There's literally hundreds of options to choose from, but one option for a pretty budget price are pudding keycaps from HyperX. If you don't know, pudding keycaps essentially make your RGB on your keyboard look crazy good while still keeping a pretty minimal look to your keyboard if you want that. Now, these HyperX keycaps are double shot PBT, which basically means the numbers and letters are actually a separate piece of plastic from the rest of the keycap. That means it's practically impossible to wear away the legend since it's not printed on. The PBT means that the keycap shouldn't shine over time and actually should keep their textured look and feel even with heavy use. These keycaps come in at just 25 bucks, and they're actually one of the best things I got to spice up my setup years ago, and I still have them on my HyperX Alloy Origins Core just because I like them that much. The great thing is these are advertised to fit all MX type switches, and honestly they should probably fit even more. Just double check your switch type is compatible before actually buying these. There's just something about lighting that really seems to transform a space, which is why I really like the pudding keycaps. But if you want to go even bigger, you could look into something like Wise Bulbs. Now, the great thing about Wise Bulbs, besides the fact that they're fully customizable from an app that we'll talk about in a second, is that they're extremely cheap. You can pick up 2 of these for $23. Now, the lights aren't super color accurate in my opinion, even though they do have a 90+ CRI rating, and you can have trouble reproducing certain colors like light oranges, but for most people, these are going to work perfectly. Now, beyond RGB, the Wise Bulbs can actually hit 1800 to 6500 Kelvin temperatures. So if you're someone like me who makes YouTube videos, you can easily match them up to your primary lights, and paired with a max of 1100 lumens, these will be plenty bright to do pretty much anything you need. Now these bulbs can be brightened or dimmed, which is super helpful for people like me who use them at our desk setups, because I don't want to have this super bright light bothering me while I'm flaming my bot laner in League for dying too much. To connect to the bulbs, it really just requires you download the Wyze app, connect to them over 2.4 gigahertz or Bluetooth, and the sync process is super easy. That means you can actually control the lights from anywhere. You don't need to be in proximity to them, which can be super handy if you forgot to turn them off, or if you're gone for a while and want to turn them on to make it seem like someone's home. And of course, you can set these up with Google Home or Alexa if you want to set up routines, turn the bulbs on or off, or really do anything to control them. You can do it all through there. But I hear you. You have your lights and your fixtures that you already want to use. You don't want to buy extra lights to do that. And that's actually perfect because the Wyze plug pretty much allows you to turn any dumb device smart. I have this super cool salt lamp in my office that gives off a nice orange hue, but the light bulb inside is not standard, so obviously I can't throw a Wyze bulb in there. So what I actually do is throw one of these Wyze plugs into any normal socket and connect the lamp there. Then you simply hold down the sync button on the side of the plug until it blinks, connect to it from the Wyze app, and you're off to the races. Now I do wish that Wyze made a bigger version of this plug, or maybe even a hub, so I could plug in multiple devices and control them all from one single plug, but they don't currently, so this is kind of what we have to live with. I also wanted to make sure that when I say budget, I'm including some extreme budget options in this setup. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is a $15 coiled cable from Asceni. The packaging for this guy is not something that really screams premium, and I'm not a huge fan of the gamery style art on the front, but they do include some free stickers in the box, and that's always a win. I had to go with the white cable to match my white GMMK Pro, but of course there's a bunch of colorways to choose from if white isn't your style. And to be honest, for only $15, you're actually getting quite a bit of quality out of this thing. From the molded connectors, which are more durable than heat shrinked ones, to the extra thick braided cable. Now Asceni also claims that the cable is going to be more compatible. It even fits in my GMMK Pro, which has a very weird USB-C port, so I kind of believe them. Now, I'm not gonna lie and say this is the best cable you're ever gonna buy for your keyboard. There have been reports online of these Asceni cables disconnecting over time, but I feel like that's kind of the trade-off of going for such a cheap item. You're kind of giving up longevity and durability for the cheaper price point. Now, that being said, if you wanna increase your budget just a little bit, for $50, you could pick up something like the Glorious coiled cable. And if you've seen anything on this channel, you know I'm a pretty big fan of Glorious, and this is no exception. I picked up their Glorious coiled cable in the Glorious Gold colorway, and I couldn't be happier. Now, the cable does come in at what I would consider the higher end of budget, but for $50, you're getting quite a bit of quality. The first thing you'll notice if we compare this to the cheaper Asceni cable is the 5-pin aviator connector that GMMK uses for their cable. The aviator connector is basically just a cool way to connect the coiled part of the cable to the straight part that actually connects to your computer. And in my opinion, it adds just enough detail and style to really make this cable super dope. The GMMK version of this cable is also higher quality in terms of the actual cable. Featuring a double-sleeved braided cable, you can pretty much just feel the premium value even for the more budget price point. The coiled section of the cable is 6 inches long, while the straight section is 4 feet long, so you have plenty of room to connect this to your PC behind the scenes, which is actually why I went with this cable in the first place. I'm able to feed the cable behind my setup into my PC without having to worry about the cable pulling or catching because it's too short. The actual connection features a USB-C to USB-A connector with USB 2.0 gold-plated cables. If you are planning to pick up any of these cables or the keycaps, something that you could pair it with would be something like the Wolmir WK61. This is a 60% keyboard coming in at only $40, and normally I'm not a fan of these off-brand entry-level keyboards because they tend to use off-brand entry-level switches, but that's not the case for the WK61. Now, since the WK61 has a see-through acrylic case, the first thing you'll notice is it's very RGB friendly. The RGB is actually pretty customizable, and you can filter through a bunch of preset modes to get to the one you like. I do want to give a warning here though and say while Wolmir does technically have software you can download, they don't actually have an official website to do this from, and I've had bad experiences in the past downloading these kind of off-brand softwares, so do that at your own risk if you want to customize the RGB or keybinds on this keyboard. There's also some weirdness I want to warn about with the switches. For example, mine came with Otemu Reds. I've seen reports of people getting Gateron switches, so I don't really know how they determine which brand gets assigned to which switch, but just know that the switches you get could be any variety of brands, it seems. As for the switches though, they are fully hot swappable, and the board does support 3 or 5 pin configurations, so you can pretty much switch out any switches you want into this board to replace the ones that they give you by default. If you also want to customize the keycaps, of course you can do that, and I would maybe recommend it because the legends on the keycaps that are included are just not my favorite. There's even some keycaps that come with 3 different symbols on the single keycap, so it just feels very cluttered, and the typeface also isn't that great. So I would highly recommend maybe switching these out for something like the HyperX pudding keycaps to make sure you're keeping that RGB friendly vibe. So this next item isn't really a office accessory, but it's definitely a budget tech item that I have started to use everywhere I go every single day, and that's AirTags. For only 29 bucks, you basically get a fully trackable device that you can put in anything you find valuable. And for me, I've been using it in my backpack just because I'm traveling so much and I'm always bringing my tech with me. I want to know where it is and make sure I don't forget it anywhere. To get started, you basically just pull the tab holding the battery from making the connection on the back of the AirTag and you're good to go. The AirTags also sync with your Find My profile, so you can see where your items are at all times, and you can even label each AirTag to represent what item it's tracking so you know where each thing is at any time. I found myself throwing this in my backpack at all times just because I'm so worried about it being stolen or forgetting it somewhere. The AirTags can also make sound, so if it's near you, you can play a sound to find it. And if you really still can't find it, AirTags work with the new proximity mode, so you can basically get directions straight to the device if you're looking for it. Overall, I think this is a really solid list of budget tech items, and we covered everything from mice to keyboards to keycaps and cables. But of course, there's so many more budget tech items out there, so I'll be making more of these videos in the future. If there's anything you found or are looking for, throw them in the comments down below. I'm sure people also are looking for those things or maybe have found them. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.